Hi, if I had time-stopping powers, I'd probably use it for evil. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. It's been a minute since we talked about Transformers, and that's not to say that there isn't more to discuss. Of course, we did Arcee way back, and today we're going to look at sort of, what's collectively known as the female Transformers. If you know me, I don't love saying female, like female character, female action figure, but in this case, it's the female of the species, and I'm going whole hog with it. We already sort of went over a bit of the Transformers history in the RC video, and also a bit of the history that's going to be very pertinent to this group of characters. However, I mean, RC and these characters are intrinsically linked, so there's some worthiness to repeating myself here. So the actual notion of a female Transformer is a bit of the issue here, and a bit of an issue that sort of plagued Transformers for many decades. Originally, in the very first wave, amongst the very first OG crew, Ratchet was sort of discussed as being a female Transformer. Not for very long, presumably, but, he was, in fact, named after Nurse Ratchet, with a D instead of a T. That name would persist, but from that point onwards, the Hasbro crew said, we're not doing female Transformers, and in fact, we're going to sort of do this thing where there's no gender in Transformers. The comics, especially, really kind of like nailed this home. The problem here being the bios, the show, the comics, all referred to Transformers as he and him, and big spoiler here, that's a gender, and you can word salad your way all around it all you like, but facts are facts. This notion would come up again, however, when Ron Friedman was tasked with writing The Transformers, the movie. His daughter was very much into Transformers. Many people's daughters were, in fact. And he was adamant that they include a female Transformer in not only the movie of the cast, but this cast that would move forward into Season 3. Hasbro eventually relented, and luckily they were sort of mid-production of Season 2. So in the episode, The Search for Alpha Trion, a cast of female Transformers was heavily featured in that episode. It was really a one and done for them, but there were a lot of ramifications that came out of this. The episode opens on Cybertron, which, as a viewer, is a rare treat. Most of the adventures of the series took place on Earth, and Cybertron was sort of this, faraway, abandoned planet that the Decepticons ran. It focused very heavily on a group of female Transformers who were long thought dead or extinct. Of them were, ones that'll eventually become quite, synonymous with the Transformers brand. The first were sort of, the general crew, which would be, Chromia, Moonracer, Firestar, and their leader, Elita-One. There were others that were featured. They, didn't have names, but put a pin in that. The episode really sort of, builds this small cast of female Transformers and just, solidifies their existence. The plot really kind of takes a bit of a turn when they're sort of fighting for survival against Shockwave and his Decepticons when Elita-One is captured. Megatron, meanwhile, calls Optimus Prime and says, "Hey, I got your girl, come get her." And so Prime actually does lead a small squad of Autobots back to Cybertron to launch a rescue mission. They do fully say, we thought you were dead. When we were fleeing Cybertron, we thought you had died. So, we all this time thought you were extinct. So, not a tear was shed, apparently. Quick little interlude here that I don't really see too many people talking about and has always really bugged me about these characters specifically. In the first episode of the G1 cartoon, the Transformers escape Cybertron, crash land on Earth, and smash into the side of a mountain. They stay there, dormant, unconscious, for 4 million years. To them, they slept away this whole time, so when they wake up, no time has passed. I don't understand how time is perceived by robots who are essentially immortal, so we'll put that aside for one moment. But during that time of them taking a dirt nap, the female Transformers were back on Cybertron, fighting for survival for 4 million years. Give it up for the big girls. Get some shots for the big girls. They're thick and thirsty. For such a short episode, they really pack it in. So, a little rundown on the named characters at the very least. So first up, we've got Moonracer. She seemed to have had a little bit of, I'd say romance, but probably more of a friend zone with Power Glide. Uh, Likewise, Inferno was sort of paired off with Firestar, no relation. And Chromia with raging heterosexual Ironhide had very clearly a much more passionate relationship than the other two. The most popular of this crew, of course, is Elita-One, who was, Prime's love interest, wife, something in between. We're not entirely sure. She certainly did have a much more of a involvement in his origins, which we'll get back to. In the episode, she's seen talking to Alpha Trion. He sort of reminds her that she has this incredible secret power, and that being, the ability to stop time. Um, the problem with this, of course, is that if she uses the thing, incredibly weakens her. So this is what we call in the 80s a chick power, where you have an awesome power, but if you use it, you're going to pass out. So see also Sorceress when she exerts herself defending Grayskull, or Chitara's Sixth Sense. This is a common trope. Nevertheless, the show does what it needs to do. We're introduced to female Autobots. We are explained to why they were never brought up before. We get to see them in a few, vehicle modes. We get some character growth. Likewise, this is very much the only time they appear here. That said, younger versions of Optimus Prime and Elita-One are shown in episodes like War Dawn. They are called Orion Pax and Ariel. Ariel being voiced by Jem herself. These were, very much more building, the history of Transformers that the Transformers movie would really kind of expand upon, but very much, very fan-favorite episodes, because for the most part, we just saw this group of robots wailing on this group of robots, and we didn't really understand the context of it. So for, things to get personal, for things to get, have a timeline, it really did sort of enrich an otherwise kind of 2D sort of cartoon, pun intended. This, of course, led to Arcee's introduction in the movie. And, given her difficulty getting made into a toy, where they had sort of a prototype that they scrapped, and then they had a repaint they might have wanted to do, and then, the humming and hawing over the years, unless some magic memo appears, at some time in the future saying, like, the female Autobots are it, Hasbro, go to town. I mean, like, I can pretty confidently tell you, like, these were never on the table. These characters were a means to an end. And a very memorable means to an end that they were, but they were never planned for toys, and I'm not mad about it. I mean, as much as I would like them, given how the Transformers were a little janky back in, the 80s, it's probably for the best. So that was then. Things are quite different now. So the idea of female Transformers was something that Hasbro did, kind of struggle with regardless. They were very, prominent fan favorite characters in Beast Wars, but they would sort of pop in and out of Transformers, throughout the 90s and early 2000s since. Arcee, of course, was always the girl robot. Whenever you needed a character who was the girl, Arcee was your go-to gal. This would change, however, in the 2010s when, Hasbro would literally align their continuity with the aligned continuity. In this, they tried to sort of bring all the disparate different, versions of the Transformers under one umbrella. One means of doing this was having a shared origin. In the origin of the Transformers, they were sort of descendants of almost kind of transformery gods. 12 primes that sort of, imbued transformation, different attributes to them. Some were, say, like animalistic, some were combiners, some were whatever. Solus Prime was the one Prime who was a female, and she was the one who, her descendants would go forth and actually sort of, make female Transformers, essentially, and sort of justify the need for that. Likewise, because there's only one of 12, that really kind of would explain why there was such a small sliver of the population were female Transformers. Something else that happened out of this, and probably much more recently than, let's say, the 2010s, is that Arcee was kind of plucked out of the movie cast and retroactively plunked into the original, group of G1 characters like Ironhide, Bumblebee, Wheeljack. She sort of became one of Prime's generals, so she was no longer the girl character and much more just the main cast. As such, this sudden explosion of female characters between IDW Comics, between the toy line, between, just every aspect of Transformers, made way for new characters and old to sort of take in the slot of the girl whenever a new TV show or cartoon was, come up with. So, Arcee has evolved, But now we've got Windblade, we've got Strongarm, and we've got, again, these characters that we're talking about today. Of these characters, easily Elita-One has become the most popular, especially much more recently. I mean, she was one of the stars of the most recent movie Transformers Prime. She is featured much more heavily in cartoons. And very much, still the love interest character for Prime, but they were not necessarily always compatible in the sense that, they had the same ideologies. There's a lot more conflict there, which makes her much more interesting. I would say in second place would be Chromia. She's likewise appeared quite a bit more, and love it, because love me some Chromia. Great design. The other three, they would also get, toys out there, so you've got a good team. Likewise, of those characters not named, the fans had sort of collectively decided on names. Greenlight and Lancer, back in the dawn of the internet, essentially, and Hasbro, when making these characters finally, decided to use the fan input. A lot of these figures are kind of retools, repaints of each other, but nevertheless, it's just great to see them. If you wanted these characters, you finally got them. All that said, we got to bring it all back to Arcee again. So if you're a vintage collector, again, I wouldn't hold your breath. I mean, these were never intended for the vintage line. However, recently, Takara has been, interested in making the prototype Arcee into their Missing Link line. Granted, that was a prototype. They have something they can work against to make that, but they at least are interested in doing characters that were never made before. So, I mean, that does potentially open the door. I wouldn't bet money on it, but time and tide will tell. And that's it for the female of the species, for the female Autobots. For characters who only appeared in a single episode, they really, they took on a life of their own, and they're very intrinsic to the franchise nowadays. A lot of great designs, a lot of proof that, Autobot girls don't need to be pink, although there is, that one who is. Just great, just happy. It's so happy that these, did eventually get their flowers, much more recently, and that, if you are a fan of these characters, or just, the Transformers world as its own, you can, build the world finally. You can finish some teams. You can sort of, have, the collection you've always wanted. So these are, I would say, a great success story, and I would like to thank you for watching, for liking, for commenting, for sharing, subscribing, for all those YouTube things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.